Before we get into it, if this channel brings you value, take a second to like the video and subscribe to Warfield Prepper Chronicles. This is where serious history and real-world survival knowledge meet, and today's subject is one of the most overlooked cold weather systems ever fielded under fire. The WWI blanket arrangement was a deliberate insulation system, not a comfort item. In the frozen trenches of the Western Front, warmth was survival. Soldiers were issued coarse wool blankets, but the real advantage came from how they were arranged, layered, and integrated with uniforms and shelter. Wool was chosen because it retained insulation even when damp, a constant condition in trench warfare. The standard approach was not to drape a blanket loosely, but to fold it into a compressed layer that trapped air while reducing heat loss from wind and ground contact. Soldiers wrapped the blanket tightly around the torso before putting on their greatcoat, creating a primitive but effective vapor and wind barrier. This minimized convective heat loss, which is the fastest way the body loses warmth in cold, wet conditions. Ground insulation was the real secret to surviving frozen trench floors. Cold earth pulled heat from the body faster than cold air, and WWI soldiers learned this quickly. Blankets were folded lengthwise and placed beneath the body when resting, even for short periods. When possible, straw, wooden duckboards, or spare clothing were layered beneath the blanket to increase insulation. The blanket was never placed directly on wet ground without a buffer. This system mirrors modern cold weather survival doctrine. Insulation below matters more than insulation above. Today, this can be applied by placing wool blankets over cardboard, pine boughs, foam pads, or even folded clothing when sheltering in garages, basements, or unheated rooms during winter power outages. Body heat retention depended on sealing heat zones, not just piling on layers. You know, those World War I troops really understood that uncontrolled gaps killed warmth. Blankets were wrapped high around the shoulders and tucked under the arms to prevent heat from escaping the core. When socks froze solid, feet were wrapped separately, using strips torn from damaged blankets. This kind of localized insulation prevented frostbite and kept circulation active. Modern winter preppers, honestly, can apply this by segmenting insulation, using wool wraps or scarves around joints, feet and neck, instead of relying solely on heavy outerwear. Sealing heat zones is, frankly, more effective than adding bulk. Moisture management determined whether warmth lasted or failed. Wet wool still insulates, but soaked wool, especially when compressed, actually accelerates heat loss. Soldiers rotated blankets whenever possible, airing them out during brief dry windows. They avoided sleeping directly in damp clothing by wrapping the blanket around dry inner layers. This is directly applicable today. If you're dealing with winter storms, grid-down scenarios, or unheated shelters, rotate blankets, dry them near heat sources when available, and never compress wet insulation against bare skin. This World War I blanket arrangement worked because it followed core thermal principles: air-trapping ground insulation, wind blocking, and moisture control. These principles, honestly, remain unchanged. A single wool blanket, used correctly, can outperform multiple synthetic layers used poorly. For those facing harsh winters, limited heating, or emergency conditions, this knowledge is practical, tested, and reliable. If you found this breakdown useful, subscribe to Warfield Prepper Chronicles, share this with fellow historians and survivalists, and keep this knowledge alive. Cold doesn't care about era. Preparation always matters.